everyone, I'm here to chat to you today all about makeup brushes. So there's so many in the makeup world that I've decided to split this video up into two parts to make it super easy. So today we're going to talk all about base brushes, so anything to do with foundation, blush, bronzer, contour, highlight, anything like that, all over face powder. And then next week we're going to chat all about eye brushes and detail brushes and stuff like that. So to make it as simple as possible, I'm going to break it into two parts, which is what we're doing today. So before we get started, I want to talk to you a little bit about what the brushes do and how they work and how you can, by looking at a brush, identify how you're meant to use it. Because there are so many different ways that you're meant to use brushes that just by looking at it, sometimes you can't always tell by, reading the label. But if you actually know what to look for in a brush, then you'll know when you go to buy one if you actually need it or not, or if it's just replacing something you've already got, or if it's not going to work for the product that you have. So to make it as simple as possible, I want to talk to you about how a brush is put together and also what the bristles do and the different kind of bristles you can get so that you understand how it all works. So for example, this is a brush that I use most days. This is my foundation brush that I use on myself every day. So this one, particular one, is from Pout Cosmetics, and it's a foundation buffing brush. But I'm going to use it as an example to kind of break down how a brush is put together. So you've got three parts to a brush. You have a head, the ferrule, which is where the bristles meet the handle, and the handle. So what happens is when a brush is made, all the little bristles also get put into the ferrule in here with the glue, and that holds the brush together. And then you have the handle, which is why often they'll break apart here, is because this is the most important part of the brush and this makes it usable. So if this is still together and your handle comes off a brush for whatever reason, it's totally okay. Just stick it back in. I know it can be annoying sometimes, but this part here is the most important part of the brush. Whatever you do though, don't just use the top and not the bottom and just pull them apart. I think it's really important that you have it the way that it's meant to be made and the way that it's meant to be held so that you use the brush correctly. So the way you hold a brush and the way to know how to hold a brush is by holding it basically where the handle and the ferrule meet. So when they meet here, generally that's the balanced point, whereas if you hold it from here, it gets too heavy, or if you hold it from here, it's too heavy on the head. So it's really important that you hold your brush correctly. So by holding it where the ferrule and the handle meet, right in the center there, you're going to get an even balance in your hand, and you're not going to feel as though if you're too close, you're like stabbing your face, and if you're too far back, you're kind of like out in the wilderness, not even being able to control your brush at all. So it's really important that you hold your brush in the correct spot to make it as easy for you to use as possible. And the last thing that you want to do when you're looking at a brush to work out what kind of motion you're meant to use is by looking at the shape of the ferrule here where it meets the bristles. So if you're looking at a brush, for example, that's a rounded brush, so round here means you go around in circles, and it's also the way you'll clean it. Never ever scrub back and forth because it's not the way the brush is made to be used. So it's meant to be used in a round motion. Whereas something like this that's flat, so the ferrule here is inside the handle, and in here is where all the bristles are put into the brush. So you want to make sure that you're using it in that shape. You're going back and forth because that's the way it's made. You can go this way as well, but you wouldn't necessarily go around in circles with this brush because it's not made to go in circles. As much as it's soft and beautiful and feels amazing, it's made to go in different directions to your round brushes. That's why they are different shapes and they do different things. They're both foundation brushes, but they're just used in different motions. So depending on if you prefer a more rounded motion when you're doing your makeup or a straighter back and forth motion, you can use this one. It just depends what it is that you want to do. And finally, the last thing about your brushes is to what brush you'll pick when you see it in a shop, or which brush you might pick up out of your little toolkit. Comes down to the hair. So the hair that comes out of the bristles will do two different things. If it's synthetic, like this brush is, which most of your vegan brushes are, you'll pick up the product with the brush and it will deposit 100% of that product onto your face. Whereas if you use an animal hair brush like this one, which I'll explain the cruelty-free side of things with animal hair in a sec, if you pick it up with a natural fiber, it's going to slowly disperse it on your face over time. So what happens is, rather than picking it up and putting it straight down on your face like you would with a synthetic brush, for something that you want to kind of spread further, or something that you want to have the time to buff and blend, you go for a natural hairbrush because it's going to pick up the product but slowly disperse it over the face over time. So I know a lot of you guys follow me because I am cruelty free, and that's something that I'm super passionate about, and sometimes people question how you can be cruelty free if you use animal hair brushes. But I only use one brand of animal hair brushes, and the reason why I only use that one brand is because I know it's ethically sourced. I know the lady who makes it, I know the person behind the brand. I've worked with her a couple of times, and she's super passionate about this as well, so I know this is something that she also believes in. The way that her brushes are made is that she has actually visited the places to go and find out where the hair comes from and stuff like that, to check that everything's all above board. But for some of the bristles as well, they're actually doing something good for the animal. So for example, the blue squirrel hair, which is this hair here in her darker brushes, the blue squirrel is actually an animal that when they grow their hair too long, they get stuck in like branches and trees and shrubs and bushes and all that sort of stuff. And when they're stuck, they can't get food and water. They're also little sitting ducks or predators and stuff like that. So by giving them a haircut and then letting them go, they're able to kind of continue on their merry way without getting stuck in little trees and stuff. So the blue squirrel hair is also doing something really good for the blue squirrels, which is really nice. I wish they were blue though, but they're brown. But they still are super soft and beautiful. And it's a really gorgeous, gorgeous hair and a really beautiful texture on the skin. So you can check her out, have a look at what it is that she does and how her brushes are made and stuff like that. They're all handmade brushes, which means that you're going to get an immaculate brush every single time. They're made over in Japan, I believe, and they're just beautiful. So definitely check them out if you want to get animal hair brushes that are cruelty free rather than having to shop the vegan lines all the time. Because synthetic brushes, yeah, they will do something different to your natural hair brushes. So definitely have a look at her range. She's stocked at Mecca now too, and I think Beautylish is the other website that she's on, I'm pretty sure. But check it out and you won't be disappointed. These brushes are beautiful. So to chat about how you actually use a brush, I'm going to talk to you about what the different kind of shapes and sizes are in brushes and how they all work. But mainly I'm going to chat to you about some of the main questions that I get asked with how to use the brushes and stuff like that. So I'll start with the basics, which is your foundation brushes. So we've already chatted about this one a little bit. It's a buffing brush. It goes round in circles because you've got the rounded base. So what happens with this particular brush is it's going to move the product really, really quickly because it's dense. And the other thing as well is it's going to pick up whatever you put on it and deposit it straight onto your face straight away. So this is a brush that you would probably, instead of putting product or like a whole face worth of product onto the brush straight away, you probably put a little bit, then do a bit, and then pump a little bit more on and do a bit again. It's particularly good if you've got a foundation that sets really quickly, because you're only putting on a small amount, putting it on, letting it set, and then moving on to the next section rather than having everything setting in the brush, and by the time you get to the other side of your face you can't use it or it's not working as well. So this is one that you pump a little bit out, push it on, pump a little bit more, push it on, or it's really amazing for stick foundations and heavier concealers, because it's going to move the product because of the density and strength inside. So definitely a great brush to check out. As I said, this one's from Pout Cosmetics. It's really, really beautiful. Their stick foundation is really lovely too. The next one that I get asked a lot about, because people are always kind of wondering how to make them work, is this brush here. I don't actually have one in my kit because I don't feel that they really work too well. But essentially what they are is they're a paddle-shaped foundation brush. They're usually a synthetic fiber or a silk. And what they do is they like deposit product on to the skin at 100% because of the fact that they're a synthetic fiber. And they move the product around, kind of like, imagine like a paintbrush. So back and forth, you'd move your paintbrush along the wall and it will do the same thing on your face. And what happens is you end up with streak marks from this particular brush, which is why I don't use it very often. I find I actually get more success out of those brushes if you use it in a patting motion. I used to use it heaps when I did body painting and stuff like that, but now that I don't do that as often, I don't really have a need for them, and they've kind of just disappeared from my kit over time, and I haven't really worried about replacing them. So I don't tend to use them too much, but if you are after a paddle-shaped foundation brush, there's lots of different ones out there. I just find personally they don't work too well. However, the angled ones that are slightly smaller are really great for concealer around the eyes. Ray makes a really nice one, and it's just the right size to kind of get up in underneath the eyes. Great for contouring, great for cleaning up edges and stuff like that as well. If you've gone a bit too much overboard with your bronzer or your blush, it kind of gives you a nice sharp edge without completely erasing things. So that's always really good. I find that's a better use of a traditional shape foundation brush by having the slant on the top, by having the angle on there. So definitely check that one out if you do find that you tend to need to tidy up your contour or you go too low. The angled foundation brushes are quite good for that. The other one that I use is the Radiance brush. So we chatted about this a little bit already, but essentially this brush is like airbrush in real life. So what it does is it goes back and forth like this. You go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. It's really quick. I use this a lot on clients because I can be fast without being rough. The goat hair that's used is really soft. It's really like all the ends of it, like nothing's bristly, nothing's really firm or sharp or scratchy. Super, super soft. And I've used this thing for years and you just can't kill it. It is amazing. So back and forth motions will give you the best result with this brush. It's also great if you find you suffer from lines around your jaw, because you can just go down the sides and along your jaw and smooth it out really, really easily. Really nice too for, again, cleaning up underneath contour lines and stuff if you go too low, because you can just sit it underneath and go back and forth and erase what you don't want. So that's definitely a good one. I think this is probably one of my favorite brushes ever. When they first came out, I didn't know how to use them. I watched a couple of tutorials. I was chatting to Ray and watched some of her workshops. Fell in love. Now I wouldn't ever, ever, ever be without it. So definitely check that one out. Got like way too many of them in my kit, but they're one of my favorite brushes, so I tend to reach for them all the time. The brush that I get asked a lot about that isn't a traditional foundation brush, but I do get asked about it, is a brush like this. It's called a duo fiber brush. So what this brush does is the synthetic hairs are the long ones and the natural hairs are the short ones. So what happens with these is when you put the product on, you're depositing 100% of the product through the synthetic hairs, but then the natural hairs that are on the bottom are actually going to buff and move the product better because they're going to grab it and help you shift it around the face. So what happens is any excess product that the synthetic hairs don't blend in correctly, the natural fibers will do that for you. So there's a lot of different versions of this brush out there. There's a lot of cheaper ones of this out there that have synthetic fibers in the bottom and the top. They don't do anything different to a normal blush brush. Whereas these ones, if they do have the difference in fibers from the top to the bottom, then they will actually do something for you. I remember when these first came out, I used to work for MAC way back in the day. They first came out and I was really confused. I thought at first that some of the brushes were actually falling apart because they had the two different levels of hair. I really didn't know what to use, and they were great at the time. I feel as though now they're a bit outdated compared to stuff like your Radiance brush, which works 100 times better, covers more ground and is a better shape for the face compared to something like this. Much the same as also your round buffing brushes. They're going to move product better and faster compared to your duo fiber brushes. These were great when they first came out and amazing for like mineral stuff, and that tends to be what a lot of people use them for now. But again, I think it's something that's just, it's past its use by date, a little bit like the paddle brushes. I think there's so many other buffing brushes out now that are just as great, half the price, and have actually kind of give you a little bit more from them, a bit more versatility. The last thing that I'm going to chat to you guys about base brushes in terms of foundation particularly is not a brush, but it's a beauty blender. This one's a Real Techniques beauty blender. I find these ones are the nicest by far. There's so many different beauty blenders out there. There's heaps of different shapes and heaps of different textures. I find this one works the best for me. The reason why I find this one works the best is because it's really soft. You only have to dampen it a little bit to get that softness in it. If you find that you bought a beauty blender and they're really hard, try wetting it and leave it for about an hour, wring it out and leave it for an hour or so, and you'll feel how much softer it is. And the reason it's softer is because it's got moisture in it, it expands, and it does a bit more for you that way. So the reason why I like this shape in particular is for two reasons. The pointed tip on the end is still round enough that you can kind of get it into these little areas, and then the flat side allows you to press into the larger sections. So I know I can get into the corner of my eyes with this little point, into the edges of my nose, around my mouth, all that sort of stuff, in around the brow. But the flat sides of this can also help with cheeks and the larger areas on the forehead, all that sort of thing. And all of this section here is great just to push the product into the skin without actually needing a shape. So I tend to kind of squish it this way, and then it's really round, and it will be able to kind of give me a really versatile sponge without having to have 6 different shapes. So moving on to some contour, blush and powder brushes. So there's a couple here that I really like to use quite regularly that I'd be lost without. They are Ray Morris brushes. Again, I find that I tend to use a lot of her brushes over and over and over again. And I have a whole like kind of case of brushes, but I keep just going back to these because they work so well, especially for the natural hair. I can't go past them. They're just beautiful. So to chat to you a little bit about how the brushes work. So the short side is your base, and the long side is your tail. So what you want to do if you're using this sort of brush, this is a contour brush. It's made from blue squirrel hair again. You place it at the base of where you want your color to start, and then your tail comes through and it blends it. So like anything like this shape, whether it's a blush brush, an eyeshadow brush, even an angled eyeliner brush, you always want to start your line with your shorter side and then go to your longer side as you pass through over the skin. Up next we have two different blush brushes. So the difference between these two is that one has a tapered, like an egg-shaped top, and the other one is rounded. So the round side is going to give you more of a rounded shape, obviously. But I find this is really great for blush because it's not too big. Whereas the tapered one I find is great for blending out contour. I also use it like a little bit of a beauty blender on a stick because you can get up really close in around your eye without hitting your eye. It's a little smaller than a beauty blender as well, which is great. And the goat hair is so soft that it's like a million little fingers getting in there and just kind of blending for you. So I use this for cream and for powder and liquid products. I can't go past it. I would miss this brush so much if I didn't have it. I have quite a few of them in my kit now. Every time I see one, I tend to have to buy one because they're just amazing. And there's a couple different sizes, but I find this size is great because I can contour with it, I can place blush, I can put cream and concealer and stuff like that down. They wash up beautifully, and they're good as new. As soon as you wash them, they're great. The other one, as I said, is the blush brush. This one's really great for powder blush as well. You can use it for liquid as well, but I find this one's particularly good if you want to be very specific about how you place your brush. Compared to something this big, if you were to place that on your cheek, it's like huge. You'd end up with blush everywhere. Whereas something this size is going to give you a much more kind of even placement, because you've got to think when you put your product down, you're then going to blend it out. So you always want to start with something smaller than what you want it to be. I find anything bigger than a 20-cent piece for your blush brush is too big. So something is, yeah, a 20-cent piece, size of like an American quarter, anything like that is going to be, that size or smaller is going to be good for you. So definitely check that out. I love this for contouring as well. If ever my little white brushes are already dirty, I find it's a really good one to have. So the other one that's a pretty common brush that I see, particularly a lot of people when they come in for makeup lessons and they bring in their brush kit, they'll have something like this that they use for bronzer and blush and powder, and it's all kind of in one. While I appreciate the fact that it's a big brush and it's going to get everything done, I find it's too big for blush and bronzer. It's amazing for all over powder, and I actually find I use this one more for the body than anything else, because it's got such a beautiful soft kind of texture and a soft touch that once it's on the body, it just hits those beautiful spots in a bigger area, giving you better coverage more evenly versus doing a small brush on the body. And all over face powder, this is really nice as well. I find I actually use this brush more for all over face powder than this one because I can be really specific with where I place it. Whereas the larger one I find is, unless it's everywhere, I don't tend to reach for this brush as much. But they both have their place. I find I just use this one more. I think if I had to pick one, I would pick this one. If I had to choose. The other thing as well, if you are using a bigger brush, make sure you're not ever scrubbing your face with them and holding it up really close and getting it really scrubbly, because what happens is you'll not only break the hair because it kind of comes down and hits at a 90-degree angle to the ferrule in here, which will snap all the hairs off around the edges, but you'll end up with knots in the center of your brush. And if it knots up in the center of your brush, it'll never sit closed again because it's got this gunk in the middle of it. And it means that your brush doesn't work as well because the shape's not correct. So always soft motions, hold it where the ferrule meets the handle back here, and just soft motions round in circles if it's round, back and forth if it's straight, and just get that motion happening, and kind of think of it like little kitten's paws. It should never be firmer than that. It should only ever be soft. If you're scrubbing too much, you're holding the brush too close, so pull it back a little bit. And these are some more of the detail orientated brushes for the face. So the ones that I find are pretty common that a lot of people get in brush sets are concealer brushes, but I don't tend to use them too much. I use these for a couple different things, but the main thing I use them for is actually lips. more so than concealer. But when I do use them for concealer, I find the square one I use around the edges of lips, underneath eyeliner to clean up, under brows, all that sort of stuff to get them really nice and sharp because of the square tip. Whereas the round side I find I use more for spot concealer because it doesn't have a really sharp edge that kind of giving you an edge to blend out around a spot, whereas the rounded edge kind of is a bit more of an organic shape, so you can blend it out a lot easier on the face, which makes a really big difference. I just love these for lips. I think they're such good precision brushes for lips that I'll chat a bit more about them in next week's video, but they are really amazing for that as well. So definitely if you find you put and eyeliner, you can put eyeliner on with them as well. That's yeah, you kind of anything detail orientated, they're great. The other ones that I use a lot of are these two. So I have the Deluxe Point Shader, which is a number 7, and the Fan Highlighter, which is number 25. The numbers may be different now because this is the older range of her brushes compared to her new ones. Her new ones are made a little bit differently, but just as beautiful, if not better. So these two brushes I use for highlighting. The reason why I use the 2 of these brushes versus just one, which is made for highlighting, is because I find this one's a little big for in around the eyes, whereas this one is too small for the cheeks and stuff. Sometimes I'll use it, and you can check it out in the video, but the larger brush I find is better for if you're trying to find the high points on your face, because what happens is you just use the tip of the brush or kind of on the edge like this, and what happens is you just hit those high points, whereas if you start using it like a paddle, you're going to get highlighter everywhere and it doesn't really work. So you just want to just hit just the high points where you want the product to just sit, so that you would naturally see the high point hitting the sun. That's kind of how it works, because you're not going to want highlight all the way down here if that's not where the sun naturally hits. If you're trying to highlight a cheekbone or a brow or something like that, you only ever want on the highest point, and that's where something like this works, just by kind of pressing it into the top. The way I use this one is mainly for like just inside of the eyes, to be quite honest. A little bit on the brows sometimes if I've got someone with enough space, or if it's the brush that's in my hand, I'll use it. But I find this one's really great for blending highlighter into shadow, or over blending shadow so that it looks softly, like the edges all look really soft before you get to your highlighter. So this one's kind of a bit of a mix between a face brush and a eyeshadow brush, but I find it's really, really great for highlighter too. If ever I don't have a fan brush, or the fan brush is a bit too big for someone's face, I'll definitely reach for this one. Last but not least, I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about how you clean your brushes, because I think that's really important. When you're looking at your brushes, one of the most important things is that you A, get a brush cleaner that actually works, and B, that you're cleaning them correctly so that they don't deteriorate, because one of the worst things you can do is clean your brush incorrectly and let them get wet inside, because that'll make your brush fall apart. So you can spend all the money in the world on your brushes if you want to, but if you don't care for them properly, what's the point? It's like having a BMW and taking it all on a rocky road and dust everywhere and never washing it. You want to use something that's gentle on your brushes. So I find, personally, I use a Sukin shampoo. That's the normalizing shampoo that they have. The reason why I use that, it's cruelty free and it's vegan, but the other reason why is it's got no silicones, no sulfates, no nasties in it whatsoever that will coat the bristles on your brush. A lot of people prefer to use a brush cleaner as such because it's alcohol based and it won't leave any residue whatsoever on your brushes, which you definitely can do, but the difference is that the shampoo will kind of just give it a deeper clean compared to, say, your alcohol sprays. So something that comes in like a little spray bottle like this will be a little bit different to something that's actually going to wash it out. So I find a spot cleaner while you're there on the day, if you just want to quickly get a product out, or if you're a makeup artist and you're going between clients, a spot cleaner is fine as long as it's alcohol based to sanitize everything, then that's okay. But when you get home and you want to actually get the product out of your brush so your brush performs better, you want to make sure that you actually use something that's a bit soapy to get out of it. Or your alcohol needs to be a super strong one to make sure that it gets rid of everything out of it. But if you're using anything that's like a long wear product or anything like that, you're probably going to have to wash it to get it good again. So the way I use my brushes and the way I wash them is once I get the little bit of shampoo, I get the brush, dip it in water, but not actually to the ferrules. So it's only ever the tips, because the water will travel up anyway and you don't want to get water inside here. So you want to just tip into the here, and then you're going to go around in circles the same way you'd use it on your face. And you're going to brush it around in circles like this because it's a rounded brush. And then all you got to do is rinse it out, don't ever rinse like this and let the water go in there. You're only ever going to keep the head facing down away from the tap. Rinse it all out, squeeze it all out. Once the inside here is clean and you don't have any foundation color on the inside, then you know that that brush is clean and ready to go. The other thing that you want to do if you don't have a range like Ray's that has the magnet on the bottom, you want to make sure you hang it out over the edge of your table, so it's the head is actually out over the edge so that air can get the whole way around the brush, and that will make it nice and clean and it will dry really, really easily, and you won't have like a flat side or anything like that which ruins the shape of the brush. It will make it all last a lot longer for you, which is really good. The other thing as well, when you are washing something that's a little bit more precise, like say like one of these little brushes, the thing that you want to make sure you do is you don't scrub them. Like you don't kind of go like this and get them really agitated, because you'll end up with brushes that don't come back to the right shape, which is just pointless. So the whole idea of them is that they stay nice and precise so that they work to their function. So what I tend to do is once you've dipped it in the shampoo or whichever cleanser you're using, I just massage the product out. So the more you massage it out, don't ever bend it, because then that will make the bristles stand out like that, which happens a lot with things like angle and eyeliner brushes, because you know, people go to clean them and they're scrubbing them, but just massage it out and it will work a lot better. Your brush will last longer and your makeup will look a lot better too. So that's a much, much better way to do it, rather than trying to kind of scrub it and scrub and scrub, because you'll end up ruining your brushes. I hope today has been nice and educational for you and you've learned a few things. If there's any brushes that you have that you just have no idea what to do with, check out the free download that's under this video, because you can actually download my cheat sheet, which has a bit more in it with a few other brushes as well. But if you're not sure about anything at all, feel free to send us a message, leave a comment, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. I'll be able to share a few makeup tips as time goes on throughout the week. Have a great day, guys. Bye.